Hi there, welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. I'm your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where I believe that as you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And we also believe that you gain so much power by having a process to process. You'll see what we mean. How are you doing? I hope that this podcast is finding you healthy and well. The last week I got sick. It knocked me off my feet. And I don't get sick very often. And so when I do, I tend to find myself really looping into being so grateful for my capabilities, for my health, for my physicality, and for my brain. Because sometimes when you're sick, you can't even do anything with your brain. And so I wanted to share that with you simply because hopefully you're not experiencing sickness. If you are, I'm sorry. But I wanted to share that with you just because I hope that you're doing a little check today. A little check into gratitude just for all that you're capable of. Sometimes I know we get caught up in all of the things that we have to do, and we don't realize that we just get to do those things and how smooth it makes our life that we get to do those things, right? Taking care of ourselves, our homes, our families, our jobs, all the things that we do. So I just wanted to plant that little seed for a minute. In this first season of the Mindset Check podcast, if you're new here, what we do is we read through my journals from when I was 15 and pregnant. And I went through a few tough years, and I lost my little girl when she was 9.5 months old. And so we're diving into all of that stuff. So if you want, you can go back and listen to us go through this chronologically, or you can just jump in with us today. However, and wherever you find us, we're happy that you found us. In the entries that we read today, there are a few new friends, but they are pretty self-explanatory, and we can just jump right in. April 5th, 1995. Well, I've just got home from stopping at Mia's. I'm going to be her maid of honor on the 3rd of June. We've been friends quite a while, and I actually feel honored and proud and excited. And I really hope everything works out with her and Jack. Before I went there, I was at my support group, and we did this stress exercise that's really great. I'm doing it to Jesse when he's home. He's in Ogden for all of this suing and BS with Willie's. And I'm really anxious for him to come home. And I'd just like to hold him and tell him I love him unconditionally, but he's not here. And I miss him terribly. And I haven't talked to him since this morning. And I want to tell him everything that's going on. I really wish he'd call. I wish we could be a married couple, happy with everything, and that we could both be more understanding in our lives. Were working perfect, and we had Taylor, and there was no stress. I guess I'm describing heaven. Perfect. And it will be. We'll strive. I applied at Matrix, where Shelley works, and I think I'll like it there. I hope. $6 an hour, plus Jesse working. We should have enough to pay bills and make ends meet. Taylor, I miss and love you. And basically, you're my reason for striving, so we can all be together as a family. Your dad, whom I love more than I ever have, you and me. It already sounds too good, but hey, heaven is perfect, right? I love you. April 13th, 1995. Hello. Jesse and I are doing great. 2 nights ago, I told Jesse that if he didn't quit smoking, friends, beer, basically everything, we would get a divorce. I came home and he went to Andre's. By the way, Andre is really tripping out. He really likes Shelley, but Shelley is involved with Ed and probably very confused. Anyway, he went to the first day of his new job, construction, cleaning up the new middle school. And I went with my friend Josie, and she started a headache and numb fingers and couldn't see. I was very scared. I took her home, did some things for her. Jesse came and got me, and we went with his mom to our support group. There we showed Taylor's video, pictures, memories, and song. And then we went from there to arguing for a long time after, about 2 hours. I couldn't stand anything. I lost it. I just went around the corner, sat or laid in a field, and cried. Jesse found me, and I got in the truck. And I couldn't help myself. I cried and cried and cried. I honestly lost it. I've never done that before. I couldn't stop all the pressure. Bills. Jesse and I not getting along. Taylor. Jesse wanting to move to Winnemucca. The deal with the truck. Thinking if we didn't straighten up, we wouldn't all be a family again. Other people of the world talking Easter, and that we were going to give Taylor a bunny. And I almost lost Jesse. And all of that. Jesse promised me he wouldn't drink, overdo his friends, everything. I asked, but his smoking is put off until after all of this stress is over. Winnemucca might be good for us. Just us. Jesse would make $17 an hour. A lady is sending us an application. I figure if he gets the job, we were meant to go there. And if not, we weren't. I got a new job at Matrix starting Monday. Excited but scared. Taylor, I miss you, and I know you're not far away. I love you. Ooh, so many levels of stress. So many levels of so much to handle. I think it's really interesting that I had learned a stress exercise from my support group that I wanted to teach Jesse. You know, I kind of wish I had written down what that was in my journal, just because I'm curious as to what it was that helped me at the time. There are so many stress exercises that, you can do to help relieve your stress. And even the simple act of like breathing in for 4 counts and then holding it for 2 and then letting it go for 8. Things like that are just so great at helping you regulate and kind of restore or get back to baseline with your feelings and kind of be in touch with, not letting your brain like cycle out of control, because sometimes that's what happens when so many things are happening, right? And even though I'm telling that here we are experiencing all of this stress and there's a lot going on, and there is, we are experiencing it in the middle of grief, and we're going through some lawsuit, though I was a bit removed from that, really. I just know that it was stressful. I know Jesse was handling a lot of that stuff. And he was gone a lot. Entering into this time in the spring, you'll see that as time continues in this period of time, he is gone a lot. He vacates town. He goes and lives in Ogden, or he goes to other places where I'm just staying with my parents. And honestly, that was, looking back, staying with my parents where life was stable was probably really amazing for me, because I wasn't experiencing stability outside of that, as far as like in our relationship. So for me to exist in a home where there was stability, I'm sure that made such a huge difference on all of the landscape of everything that was happening. I talk about some friends and, my sister dating some people, and there's this moment, which is what I really want to focus on the very most of all of the things, all of the ins and outs of me asking him to let go of all of this stuff that he was doing that I didn't want him to do. Maybe leaving and living in Winnemucca, getting another new job, all of these things, myself getting a job. The one thing that I really want to focus on during this episode is this event when I went into the field. I wrote how I went to this field and I just couldn't stand anymore. I just sat down and I like laid. And I remember laying down in that field and not really even caring that it was like I was just laying on dirt. I remember I was kind of under a lone tree and I lost it. I really lost it. I cried, and I remember in that moment I cried so hard. And I remember, like, for me to describe it to you now, I would say that I was surprised at the sounds that came out of my body. Like deep moaning and just the truest form of hurt. And I don't even know how, like, Jesse knew I don't remember how he knew where I was, or, maybe he heard me. I don't know. But he did come and get me, and I just cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And, I'm saying in this entry that I have never done anything like that before. And I couldn't kind of help it because of all the pressure and the bills and the relationship issues and all of that stuff. But one thing that I really want to approach here is that was probably exactly what I needed. I was somebody who kind of held my emotions inside, and I was trying to really be strong for the people in my life because I knew that I knew that it was hard for them to see me struggle, like my parents, my family. I knew I knew they wanted to give me that space, but I think in my mind, I could only imagine, the suffering I was feeling myself, and then knowing that you would be watching your child suffer as well. And I think I just thought it was probably better to just put a smile on my face. And when I did cry, I cried in private for the most part. But talking about how that was probably the exact thing that I needed is because too often we go through our life and we hold on. Instead of letting the feelings come and emotions come, we hold on to them. And one thing that I've learned later in life is how life events can lead to mental conditions. It's a poisoning in a sort of way when we don't process, when we don't lay down in a field and let our emotions completely overcome us. And so I want to talk to you a little bit today about my current husband, who is amazing, and we have such a fun, there's so many fun details to the story that we will get to tell you about how we came to be. But for now, I just want to reference the way that Jake's journey has taught us so much about life and learning about the importance of processing, the importance of allowing an event to happen and to feel it all the way through our body. Because sometimes we make the event get stuck. Okay, so sometimes something will happen to us and we, instead of just letting it go, right, and processing it and just letting it go, we hang on to it for certain reasons. And my husband, Jake, over the course of, we've been married now for 23 years, and there's a good chunk of time where he continued to develop things that were layers and layers and layers on top of this mental condition. And it's important for you to know that we're going to dive into all of the ins and outs of our story. And there's more coming inside of that. That's really fun. One thing that I just want to help you understand, because if I could go back in time and if I knew that telling a story, okay, let's start here. Let's figure out the reasons why we tell our stories, right? Like, why do we tell the stories from our past? Because I think that's a really, really great place to start in your life. Because sometimes what we're doing when we're ruminating about the past, or when we're telling our story, or, you know, whatever it is where we're taking a look back, if we can break it down and figure out why we're telling that story in that moment, then we can figure out what it is that we're holding on to and the reason. Okay? So just follow me for a minute. Sometimes when we tell our stories, we receive validation from other people. And we go, yeah, that really sucked that happened to me. And yes, I am a victim. Or yes, I have a lot of reason to stress. So in Jake's case, he would tell this story. And whether he was telling it to himself or to people on the outside, the story that he told himself of the hard, the things that were difficult, it was continuing to tell that story in a way that he was wrongfully done. Okay? So it's important to remember the way that we tell our story and the payoff that's giving us versus just feeling the feeling. Because the feeling is, I feel jaded, I feel hurt or attacked, or that makes me feel angry, or that makes me feel sad, right? And just being able to feel the feelings. And so pay attention to your life. Pay attention to when you're telling yourself these stories, or when you tell them to the people in your life. Is it strictly informational? Is it for them to be in tune with a feeling? Because most of the time when we retell our stories, even in my retelling you all of my stories, what we're actually doing is desiring to relive an emotion. And it's important for us to understand if that emotion or that story is causing us to be stuck. So let me explain it to you this way, because this is the way that when Jake was going through so much of his anxiety, and we were going through so much of, just the very beginning layers of knowing that we needed to unpack all of the things that had happened, this is what made the most sense. Okay? So we learned that at night when we go to bed, and we've talked about on this podcast the difference between our subconscious mind and our conscious mind, right? So our subconscious mind is the one that's always running. It's the one that breathes when we're sleeping, that helps our heart to beat when we're sleeping, right? It's the one that kind of goes on autopilot when we're driving on a path that we've driven on over and over and over. And we can still arrive at the destination, even though our conscious mind kind of went into daydream land, right? It's because our subconscious mind kicks in, and it's the always running, always there. And it also holds so much of our deep beliefs about ourselves, about our life, about the way that the world works, okay? And our conscious mind is the mind that is sometimes awake, sometimes engaged, sometimes aware of the thoughts that we're processing, right? And our conscious mind can influence our subconscious mind, which is why and how we can experience kind of the rewriting of our brain. So if you're to picture that in your brain, you have all of these files floating around, okay? And when we experience hard emotions and things that we don't process, we don't allow the emotion to run through our body, then we have all of these files floating around inside of our mind. And during our waking hours, our conscious mind just can repress or escape those thoughts, those feelings by saying, I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to do something different. I don't desire to think about those things. That is a trigger for me. I don't want to feel that. And we continually make all these conscious choices when we're awake. But remember, our subconscious brain is the brain that never turns off. So when we go to bed at night, our subconscious mind knows that there's all of these thoughts and these feelings that we haven't addressed, that we are trying to escape from, right? That we are paying attention to a different story about them because we don't want to feel them, right? Maybe we're going to focus on the feeling that we get when we feel validated when we tell our story, versus staying in tune with the feeling that we're feeling, right? Actually processing the event of what happened. And so what happens is we get all these files sort of floating around inside of our mind, and it kind of makes a mess of our brain. It kind of is like when we are able to turn our conscious mind off at night and we go to sleep, our subconscious brain says, wait a second, there's all these files floating around. We're going to try and fix it. And you can't sleep at night when your brain is functioning like that. When you wake up during the day, you can function because your conscious mind says, oh, yeah, remember how we handle that? We focus on other things. Oh, yeah, remember how we handle that? We focus on being the victim. We focus on being validated because our story, XYZ, fill in the blank, of all of the reasoning behind the reason that you're not confronting these really hard feelings. And we do it without knowing it. We do it without knowing it because those hard emotions, we don't want to feel. We don't want to lay down in the field. We don't want to, allow that pain to coerce through our body. And so we avoid it. And then when we try to go to sleep at night, we have all these files that aren't organized, that are floating around, and our subconscious mind is desperately trying to file these folders. Because what happens is when we actually take care of them and when we actually process them, it's like they become filed away in these neat little filing cabinets inside of our brain. And then we can go through our life and continue functioning. And so when we learned that view or that vision of these files and these filing cabinets inside of our brains, and the way that that works and the way that they become neatly filed when we process them, it changed everything. It was then that we really knew that we needed to file the things away by processing. And there are so many ways that we can process, right? We've talked about a lot of ways that we can process on this podcast. It's literally so incredible to think of just facing them head on and just feeling your feelings. Being able to lay down in a field and to allow those feelings, whatever it is, to course through your body, to just move through your body. And so I want you to picture yourself, okay, regardless if you have something to process now or not, something that you haven't focused on, something you've allowed to be turned into a trigger, right? Because that's what a trigger is. It's us not wanting to face whatever that is. And so instead of telling ourselves, because, one of the best things you can do in the moment when you experience a trigger is you can just allow the feelings to come and breathe and feel your clothing and remind yourself, I'm not in that moment. It's not happening to me. It's not re-happening to me. But then allowing yourself to feel the feelings. And so what you can do is just, first of all, just picture yourself doing this. Because I find that when we can build a picture in our mind, then it's easier for us to come back to it. Just picture yourself laying down. And you don't need to be in a field. But picture yourself just laying down on the ground, on your bed, and putting your hand on your chest, another hand on your belly, and just allowing yourself to have compassion for whatever pain or hurt you're feeling. Not judging why you're feeling this or that way, simply just welcoming the feelings. My husband Jake, to be able to process the different layers of what he was experiencing, he went to EMDR therapy, which is fantastic as well. But it's interesting if you pay attention to what happens if you were to lay down and feel your feelings, or if you were to go to EMDR and feel your feelings. Okay. Even though it's tough and it's hard, and that's why therapy and friends or whatever is really great, because somebody can hold your hand and walk you through it. And sometimes we need that support. We need that. But paying attention to it really is allowing that feeling to move through your body. Just allowing it to move through. So remember, as you're going through the motion of figuring out how you want to process the thing that's in your life, the thing that you continue to refill, or the thing that, like for Jake, continued to cause layers and layers of anxiety because he wasn't just handling and feeling the feelings, which really is the most easy and simple way. But because we're so judgmental of our own selves, we face so much resistance to it. And so recognizing that we want to let it go is kind of the first thing. And then allowing ourselves to feel that emotion and focusing on the feeling and not to be consumed or worried about the thoughts that come up, but just to be focused on the feeling and the sensations that you have. And that's really the most simple process. And we make it so complicated. Sometimes we want to hold on to it because we also want to hold on to the feeling of validation, right? The story that we're telling ourselves about the situation. Sometimes our thoughts get in the way of our feelings, of just allowing ourselves to feel. And so there's tons of ways to process. Just allow in your side of your heart to know that you do want to process, and all that really matters in the process is that you have a feeling. Okay? So I like to think about snakes. I mean, I really don't like snakes, but I like to think about the shedding of their skin being a process. And when you learn a little bit about snakes and the way that they shed, they're shedding it because it doesn't fit them anymore. Or because it's old and worn out. And so they shed their skin. And snakes really do shed their skin up to about once a month. And it's interesting when you look at the process of how they shed. They actually begin to look a little bluish in color, and their eyes look opaque. And then what they like to do is they find a safe place to kind of hide out until they begin shedding. And then they rub their old skin on a rock or a tree or like another hard surface. And then they can slip out of their old skins by wiggling across and against those hard surfaces. And some snakes, can shed their skin in water. There's all of these different ways. Each species has a way to shed their skin. And isn't that so interesting with our lives and having a process to process? Having a process to process. Having a way that we check in with ourselves and we feel our feelings. Maybe it's through meditation. Maybe it's through yoga. Maybe you lay down, on a regular basis and feel yourself. Or maybe you just recognize that when you go through hard things or hard feelings, that it's important to just feel it so that you can let it go. It's important to recognize that we need a process to let go. Our pain needs the time to feel acknowledged. You do this by getting out of your head and into your body in whatever thing that you choose to process, no matter what it is. Joe Dispenza says, no doubt, what you're creating inside of you begins to create what is outside of you. So don't you think it's so interesting that life events can lead to mental conditions? If we don't process the things, it can interrupt our sleep. It can interrupt our life. It can cause us to become addicted to these negative and stressful feelings. We can become dependent on the chemicals that come with those feelings and all the negative emotions. And then our brain, that becomes a default way of thinking and processing. And the stress knocks our brain and our body out of balance. And then we create a completely different reality in front of us, something that we never wanted, simply because we're avoiding. We're putting so much emotion behind avoiding feeling our feelings. And when we really allow ourselves to feel those feelings, we can recreate how we think and feel about these stories in our life. Right? So instead of the validation that comes from, yeah, you were done wrong, we can go, wow, look at how many things I learned during the process of that. When we reframe events inside of our brain, we bring different meaning to what happened. And we change the narrative. So when we do that, it helps us improve, and we're shown how it makes us stronger, right? You can see stories of victims, like Viktor Frankl through Man's Search for Meaning. I love how he had every single right in everyone's book to sign up to be a victim, to receive validation from the people around him, right? That he had a hard life, that he had been dealt a really hard hand. And instead, he chose to teach us that nobody else owns your brain, only you. And he found and showed us deeper ways and deeper meanings. And we can find that from stories around us. Good examples of people letting go, feeling the feelings, right? Letting them run through their course, and then being able to reframe them inside of their own brain. Having a process to process. I recently learned about a tree called a ponderosa, and the bark of the tree actually looks like jigsaw puzzles. And it has a purpose. If the tree catches on fire, these little plates or little pieces of jigsaw puzzle, they pop off as the bark burns, and it allows it just to fall down and to burn these little fires, like a low intensity fire. And in a way, it's protecting the tree from not completely igniting into flames for the tree itself. It's handling all of the small fires. How cool, right? Like when you think about your own life and you think about maybe your bark, maybe a part of you catches fire. And if we have a process, we can pop that off and allow that fire to completely run its course and then to die out. And when we do that, we protect ourselves. We protect our whole entire being, our whole environment of being, because it's no longer a part of us. And we don't have partial fires all over. It makes it complete. So I love the example of the ponderosa. That many times in our life, if we will just feel and allow that fire to run its course on small parts of us, versus trying to avoid it, and then it catches onto the next little puzzle piece and the next puzzle piece and the next, until it's completely overtaken us and we're completely on fire. Deepak Chopra said, in the process of letting go, you will lose many things from the past, but you will find yourself. I think that is so beautiful, because if you were to ask yourself, who am I going to be in this story? The story of whatever it is that you're telling yourself, and you suddenly become more aware of the story that you're telling yourself, right? The story that you're telling everyone around you, that's giving you whatever the validation it's giving you. You might have to give up being one character so that you can be a different one. You might have to give up being the character that had something done wrong to you so that you can be the character that rises above that. So it's important to pay attention to the reasons that we're telling ourselves the stories, because it provides insight into what it is we are telling ourselves. It also provides insight into, have we truly felt it? And then what is really happening in our life? Are we creating events that become triggers? Are we creating events that don't allow us to experience a good night's sleep. And when we really can take a look at how our life is going, that's when we can decide what the future looks like. Does that make sense? When we can really look at how we feel and what our environment is inside of our body, we get to decide and see how our life events are creating our future. Are they creating mental conditions? Or are they creating incredible understanding about life and the human experience? Do we get to tell a motivated story to the people around us? Are we attaching to how the human spirit has the capacity to overcome almost anything? What are you attaching to? When we really evaluate that, we open ourselves up to the growth potential that life has for us. Thich Nhat Hanh said, "The ocean of suffering is immense, but if you turn around, you can see the land." So just remember that everybody goes through stuff. Every one of us. And we all, like the snake, need a process to process. We all, like the ponderosa, when little fires start, we need a way that we handle that. We need to lay down in a field sometimes and just feel ourselves feeling the feelings. Because then we can take a look at what we're thinking. We can reframe it and we can decide what our story holds. Karen Salmonson said, "Don't let the darkness from your past block the light of joy in your present. What happened is done. Stop giving time to things which no longer exist, when there's so much joy to be found here and now." And I hope through that you see that you have more power than you think you do when you have a process to process. I love hearing from you, and I just wanted to remind you that if you have anything to share with me about your story and the way that this story is resonating with your story, I would love to hear it. I would love to have a conversation with you or just read a message from you. So if you want, we can drop into the podcast group, which is Mindset Check on Facebook group, or you can send me your thoughts in an email to hello@myfriendmisha.com, or you can DM me on Instagram at myfriendmisha. And I'll take a minute in my upcoming podcast to share your story with our other listeners as well. I'm just such a believer in our stories and how they help us grow. They help us grow so much. Also, this podcast can grow with your help. So if you think this information is helpful for you, then I would love it if you'll share it with someone, leave us a review, and don't forget to subscribe. And we will continue to bring you the mindset and encouragement that you need to get you through your day. And once again, thank you so much for letting me walk through a part of your journey with you today. I want to remind you as we close that the human spirit really does have the capacity to overcome almost anything. We are so resilient, and I just hope that if you're learning anything from this podcast, that you learn how much the stories of other people who went through hard things has such power to lift you and remind you of that capacity. So continue to be a seeker of that, and you will prove yourself so incredible. So incredible. Until next time, my friend.